Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slashfilmcast. I'm David Chen, and, usually I introduce the guys, and we were totally expecting that it was just going to be me and Jeff Kanata today, but emerging from the bowels of parenthood, Devindra Hardawar is back today. Devindra, how are you doing, man?
Hello, I'm back, and I'm surviving. It's everything you said it would be, Jeff. It is very tiring, very crazy. We're 12, 13 days in now with this baby, and I think we'll keep her. She's pretty cool.
Don't decide too soon. Don't decide too quickly. There's still, I think there's a 30-day return policy. So if you're only 12 in,
you get an exchange. Yeah.
So Devindra had a baby last week. And it sounds like everything went smoothly, right? No.
Yeah. It was a pretty crazy process. The whole labor and everything was pretty smooth, and now the tough part is just trying to take care of a baby forever. I likened it to the Battlestar Galactica episode 33, where every 33 minutes the silence just came. You just had to deal with it. You couldn't sleep. And with the baby, it's basically every 2 to 3 hours.
That's so good.
Same thing.
That's such a great analogy. I love that.
It's crazy.
And you feel just the same sense of dread and foreboding. Devindra, I don't know how much you want to say about this, but I feel like we recorded an episode and you were like, yeah, we're due in 2 days. And like hours after the episode recorded, you're like, we had the baby. I don't know where. It must have been the quickest labor ever. That's crazy.
It was pretty fast. It turns out, so after the episode we had recorded last, I forget which movie that was, a couple hours later, my wife was like, yeah, we should probably go to the hospital now. So the baby waited for the show to end, and I really appreciate her for that.
That's very considerate of her.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like hours after that episode. Like,
yeah.
It's crazy. That's crazy.
I couldn't believe it. I told my wife, I was like, it's any day now. And then like an hour later, I was like, there's a picture of her. Here she is. It's like crazy.
Your evening had already peaked with that episode of the podcast. And you're like, oh my gosh, more crazy things are on the way.
My worst fear was baby would, want to be born in the middle of the night. And that's exactly what happened. So we had to rush to the hospital with no sleep or anything and just try to suffer through that whole process. But it was good overall. It's an insane experience.
Was there anything that kind of surprised you about the process or that you weren't anticipating and that happened? Or
No, I mean, honestly, I know for some people, we were lucky. I think our whole labor process, we got in around 3:30 a.m. and the baby was born around 11:49 a.m. And between that seems like a long time, but while you're waiting in the hospital, it's actually not that bad. And the actual time, our doctor was just super great. And he made my wife just make it very easy for her to get the baby out. And I'm grateful for that. The entire experience for us was pretty good. I know for a lot of folks, it's much harder. So props to them too.
For me, the most disorienting thing was like the day to 2 days afterward where you're still in the hospital. I don't know how long you guys stayed in the hospital, but it felt like such a disorienting time. And you've got this new thing that's in the room with you. How did you feel about that part of it?
It was pretty crazy. So we had a room, but luckily our hospital is only like 15 minutes away from my house.
Oh, good.
So it actually made more sense. My wife's mom wanted to stick around the first night. So they stayed together with the baby. I came back and took care of the cats and just went back and, did the back and forth a bit. And that helped out, too, because it was just easier for my wife to be there if nobody else was sleeping in the room with her, too. So It all kind of worked out in a good way. Yeah.
Well, Devindra, so glad that everything went smoothly and that the baby and the mom are doing well. And Devindra pings me the other day. Like I had expected Devindra to be out for a month, to be out for a few weeks. But
I'm out of my real job for a month. But this is just fun. It's fun times.
Yeah, I mean, but just like my feeling, Devindra just doesn't know how to quit this show. And and so he pinged me the other day, and he's like, "Hey, what are you reviewing this week?" And so now tonight on the Slashfilmcast, we're going to be discussing some what we've been watching, and then we are going to do a double review. And last week we said we would review The Old Man and the Gun, the new David Lowery movie starring Robert Redford. We are going to be reviewing that movie, but before that, we're going to cram in a review of a Netflix film that you can see right now. It's called Private Life. It's a new film by Tamara Jenkins starring Paul Giamatti and Catherine Hahn. I basically just, I was talking with Jeff prior to the show and said, hey, maybe we should watch something else in addition to Old Man and the Gun. Maybe we could talk about it during what we'll be watching or something. But we all just saw Private Life, so we're all going to do a review of it. You can watch it right now on Netflix, and then come back and listen to this episode if you want. But yeah, that's what we got on tap for you today. Find more episodes of this podcast at slashfilmcast.com. You can also email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com.
The other thing we should mention, Dave, to Devindra, since he wasn't here last week, is that we are no longer a film podcast. Now we are officially a limerick podcast with occasional film information.
What did you do? What did you guys do?
Yeah, there were a lot of changes. We are now full on limericks, and I am armed with my limericks tonight. I hope, Dave, you are as well. Are you serious? Did you seriously make limericks?
Of course, and
what happened?
I will for every episode we do from now on.
Oh my God!
This is the change you wanted, and
this is like my worst nightmare, by the way, because there was that limerick meme going around, and limericks are fine, but when it becomes a meme thing, like it's too much work to be a meme.
It's a lot of work. Show. It's a lot of work to do the limericks. So okay.
But you know what? I've never shied away from hard work, especially for the fans who are demanding it. The response has been overwhelming. There are fan limericks. The Slashfilmcast is going off with limericks. It is just really Dave single-handedly touched, I think, a nerve in the audience that they've been clamoring for. And I'm so glad that Dave has decided this and really, by sheer force of his own will, made it happen. And I for one vow to have a limerick for every episode we do from now
on. Okay, well, I'm
not. It's not good. It's not good at all.
I mean, I share your concern, Devindra.
Yeah.
That said, we did get some responses to the limit. So Devindra, what happened was I was out for a couple weeks and then came back. And I said to Jeff, hey, I want to share my reactions to some of the movies you guys have talked about, but I want to do it in an amusing and concise way. So I wrote a limerick for every movie I'd seen.
Everyone's favorite amusing and concise format. Yes.
Yeah. And from that, Jeff decided to make it a part of every week's episode, which is a completely voluntary move by, like, I can't stop Jeff from doing it. I can stop myself from doing it, but I can't stop Jeff. And so if Jeff is going to do it, then that's fine. Man. That being said, I did get this email from Gokul from Auckland, New Zealand, who wrote into slashfilmcast@gmail.com. Gokul wrote in, I enjoyed Dave's limerick reviews immensely and posted in one of the movie Facebook groups I'm in. I asked for members to compose their own, and I thought I would share a few of their masterpieces with you, as well as one of my own, which isn't great. So Gokul shares the following limericks. I'm not going to read all of them, but here they are. Gokul's limerick is, a movie about Strodes I saw. The whole time I sat with clenched jaw. The music was great. Not a thing did I hate. It's a surefire box office draw. All right.
See, aren't we glad this is the new version of our show? Aren't you guys?
This is the future of film criticism.
The silence speaks volumes, Jeff.
Filmstruck is dead, but film limericks are alive.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're on the same page, Devindra. I'm glad you get it.
Okay, this one is from Lauren HW, and I guess spoilers for Avengers: Infinity War in this limerick. So skip ahead by like 10 seconds or 30 seconds if you don't want to hear spoilers for Avengers: Infinity War. Going in, I was worried about Cap, but instead they killed every new chap. The movie was rad, but boy was it sad. I'm emotionally scarred by a snap.
Now that's good. That is good limerick.
It's not good. Bad. It's not bad.
Emotionally scarred by a snap? That's excellent.
All right. Well, anyway, those are the only two from Gokul's email that I liked. So, but thanks for writing in, and I hope those help you to understand the true potential, good or bad, of this whole limerick program that Jeff seems complete hell-bent on. Anyway, let's get to the show before we have destroyed any more of our credibility here. What we've been watching this week. So this week I saw a movie called Apostle on Netflix. You guys heard of this movie, Apostle, on Netflix?
Yes.
Oh, you betcha. Yeah.
I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. In 1905, a drifter on a dangerous mission to rescue his kidnapped sister tangles with a sinister religious cult on an isolated island. So that plot, at least the beginning of it, is very similar to Wicker Man, right? Both versions of Wicker Man. But I think the story takes some pretty hard turns away from what Wicker Man did. So don't assume just because you've seen Wicker Man that this movie is the same. The thing that's a draw about this movie is that it has amazing acting talent behind it. You got Dan Stevens playing the protagonist. Michael Sheen shows up as the cult leader. And the reason I was motivated to watch this movie primarily is that it's directed by Gareth Evans. It's his first movie after directing the Raid films, which are some of my favorite action films of all time. And this is a big departure for him, right? He's working.
Well, he did that VHS short, remember?
Oh, that's right.
It was also a cult movie, and it sounded like he was working on a bigger idea after that.
Yeah, and this movie feels to me, from a storytelling perspective, to be like much more ambitious than any of those other films we've mentioned. And I think it's an amazing horror film. Like it is incredibly disturbing. It's one of those horror films that leaves you really upset. I spoke last week about The Night Comes for Us. Devindra, you seen The Night Comes for Us yet?
Not yet.
Oh yeah, that's a movie that there's like action scenes and gore that's like super upsetting. And this movie it like adds on a layer of psychological horror to the action scenes and gore that's really upsetting. So really, I think I'm going to be recovering from this movie for a few weeks. And it really upset me. It unsettled me. The imagery is really evocative. And I would recommend it for any fans of horror. I thought it was great. So that's Apostle, streaming now on Netflix. It was another movie that I had suggested we might watch today instead of Private Life. And boy, you could not get more different in terms of the tone of those movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is one that I was like, you just have to sit and like contemplate the evil of humanity after you watch a movie like this. You know what I mean? Like it's just like
people have been talking about this, and I was like, really, that Robert Duvall directed thing is popping back up on streaming services, huh?
Yeah. No, it is not the Robert Duvall movie. It is a new movie by Gareth Evans on Netflix, and boy, it's just there's some set pieces in this movie that are just really impressively shot. There's like a little bit of action in it. I would say there's probably 10 to 20% as much action in this movie as there is in a Raid movie, but when there is action, it's like, oh wow, like clearly the same guy did, the Raid and also this movie. Like the action,
he just can't help himself.
Is very similar in terms of like the style and in terms of how it's shot, and also in terms of like how the characters are brutally injured and maimed during these scenes. So I think it is a great piece of horror filmmaking. I'm like weighing whether it should be in my top 10 of the year. It's highly enjoyable if you're into that kind of thing. It's very gory, very upsetting. It's Apostle. It's on Netflix right now. That's what I've been watching this week. So, Devindra, what have you been watching in between taking care of your new child?
Oh, yeah, a bunch of things. Honestly, taking care of a newborn is a great time to catch up on TV when they're not, like, screaming. And TV is better because it's hard to keep a movie going sometimes because there's a lot of stuff happening. But I have been watching The Haunting of Hill House, the new series written and directed by Mike Flanagan, who's a director I really enjoy. He's done a ton of great stuff recently. He did Hush, Oculus, and Annabelle Creation too, I believe. And these are all
otherwise known as the Good Annabelle film.
The Good Annabelle, right? The one like randomly weird Good Annabelle. This is like I think the third reboot of this. It was a novel originally. It's a very famous novel. There was an older movie, and then there was like that terrible '90s movie as well.
Wait, Annabelle Creation was directed by David Sandberg, by the way. So
David Sandberg. Oh, I'm thinking of something else for Mike Flanagan. But basically everything Mike Flanagan has touched, I've just genuinely loved. So I'm totally down with that. This, he basically took a very famous haunted house story and just built this like incredible family story around it. You could describe the show like it feels like Parenthood meets Hereditary, which is a very strange combination. I know you really like Parenthood, Jeff. This is a show with a huge family dynamic. It's there's I believe 5 kids involved in the 2 parents, and The show is as much about their relationship with each other as it is about a crazy haunted house. And it's set up in a way, let me think, it kind of goes back and forth in time. So we see, it reminds me of the way It was constructed, or the book at least. We see them as children earlier in time, living in this house, dealing with some creepy scenarios. And then we're also cutting in time to all those characters as much older, adults, dealing with the fallout of living in a crazy haunted house. And, at some point, people die, and there's a very traumatic event that makes them all leave the house. And most of the show, honestly, is just them dealing with the fallout of this, like how this weird, crazy experience has fractured their family. And have to say, this show is fantastic. Just everything about it. Like, it's a great piece of horror filmmaking because I just love the way Mike Flanagan's camera moves around. There's a lot of creepy scenarios within this giant house, and it's the simple things like long, dark hallways, doors where something crazy is happening on the other end. There are some occasional jump scares, but I think there's so many situations where he just builds a really unique set piece. I was reminded of what was the Conjuring movie with the nun, the most recent Conjuring, where you could see a set piece is happening, right? Like, well, we're setting this up, this nun is going to jump out as us at some point, but it's the way he does it that's really interesting and unique. So it's a horror show that's really steeped in the genre. It's built for people who know what to expect. It's well written. I think all the characters are really well defined. You can really sense who these characters are from being children to adulthood. And it's genuinely scary. It's genuinely moving. It's rare to find like a horror movie or series that will honestly make you feel for characters and potentially even make you cry at times. So just have to shout out for this thing. It is one of the best Netflix series I've ever seen. And if you're into horror, and if you're into the haunted house format, this is just a really intriguing spin on all of that.
That's The Haunting of Hill House. I got to tell you, a ton of people at my office at work, right, you cannot stop talking about how amazing the show is. So yeah, it's
real good.
Things, planning to check it out. Hey, Devendra, how many episodes are you in right now?
I'm about 7 or 8 episodes, so I haven't finished it, but the most recent episode had this crazy, just Mike Flanagan, almost like he's showing off at how good he is as a technical filmmaker. Like, it feels like there was a 10 to 15 minute one shot of just people, arguing some scary scenarios. Just I don't know. As a film fan, it really is technically impressive too.
I will also say, by the way, to watch this. Sorry, go ahead.
By the way, Devendra, I think the Mike Flanagan movie you were thinking of earlier was Ouija: Origin of Evil.
Yes, Ouija. Yes.
Which is apparently was a very good film and a better sequel than the predecessor film.
Yes,
so,
I talked about that, and it was quite good. Yeah.
I've been really wanting to watch this, but it's not one that I'm able to talk my wife into watching, which means I have to sort of find my own time to watch it, and we tend to watch TV together.
Yeah.
Is the horror stuff really intense? I mean, is it something that she really would bounce off of?
It depends. Honestly, there's a lot of creepy stuff of just this is a scary person in the back that jumps out. And then there are things of just kids being genuinely terrified and kids being put in danger. And I don't know where you are at this point. There are certain scenarios where I'm I don't want to watch at this point.
Yeah.
I feel kind of weird about little kids almost dying. Yeah. That's just me right now, but we're still working through it. It's still good.
Cool.
Again, that's The Haunting of Hill House. It's on Netflix right now. Devendra, what else have you been watching?
Also, Big Mouth. Have you guys watched this or heard of this series?
Yeah, I watched an episode.
Too.
Yeah, an episode of Big Mouth. Recently.
Yeah. I honestly didn't know this existed up until a couple of weeks ago, but I was looking for a nice, animated thing to chill and watch while I'm taking care of the baby. And have to say, I genuinely love this show. The first couple episodes aren't that great. The show itself, it's about middle schoolers and high schoolers and them just dealing with the ravages of puberty. And it does this interesting thing where it turns puberty into literal monster familiars that also hang out and talk with the kids. It's a show that's simultaneously very very explicit and very gross and very I don't know, it's very base level humor at times, and at the same time the characters are great, and I think it's saying some great it's very sex positive. It's very I think it's sending a good message for kids and for teenagers who may have feelings about their bodies and what they're going through. So it's weird. It's a show that maybe parents might think it's maybe a little too mature for their kids, but it's probably the exact thing they should be watching. The first couple episodes were a little rough, but I think it gets really good. And I'm watching season 2 now, and it's just like they've definitely refined the show into something that's genuinely they can balance the crazy humor and the really, really gross, like really, really like gross humor sometimes, with like genuinely great characters and I think like meaningful messaging. And they're doing things because this is an animated show on Netflix. Like they can show naked bodies and they can show a lot of things. They can mimic porn in realistic ways that you probably wouldn't see in most other animated shows.
Yeah, I watched it and found it to be painfully awkward, and in a way that I felt like the show nails all the apprehension and the awkwardness and the kind of uncertainties and anxieties of that time period of adolescence, and so I thought it was very funny and enjoyable. But I'm also like, I already lived through that, and I don't know if I need to go through that again. I don't know if I need to re-experience all that. So I'm still like not sure if I want to continue the show, just because it is uncomfortable to watch at times, because it deals so frankly with these truths about.
I will say it's also like genuinely funny too at times, and great voice cast. You like Nick Kroll, John Mulaney. Jason Mantzoukas, who's everywhere now, Fred Armisen, and Maya Rudolph playing a couple again in another show. It's kind of funny. And Jordan Peele is like in here randomly too. So like a great cast. Like I think there's a bit in the show where they did like just like a 30-second like, so we're gonna do the Seinfeld diner scene. We're gonna do a diner scene for 30 seconds, and like they just hit the cues just right. Like it's exactly them being all the Seinfeld people, and I think they do that really well. So it gets smarter, it gets better, and I think it gets a little less awkward too, which is it makes it less painful to watch as you go on.
All right, well that's Big Mouth. It's on Netflix. Jeff, did you say you'd seen this?
Like you, I watched the first episode, and it did not hook me, but I love the talent involved. I'm a big fan of those guys and as creators, and I'm glad to hear it gets better. I just kind of fell off of it, and it didn't. And there's so much other stuff to watch that I haven't been back to it.
Yeah. Well, it's Big Mouth. It's on Netflix right now. That's what Devindra's been watching. Jeff Kanata, how about you? What have you been watching this week?
Well, I had a chance to see a very early screening of Widows, which is the new Steve McQueen. And I think we'll be doing a full review. It certainly deserves a full review. So I will just briefly mention that everybody should go see this movie. If it's not on your radar, put it on your radar.
Oh, man.
It's really good, and it's like if someone asked the question like, what would it be like if somebody did a genre movie, but with the skill and craftsmanship and talent of like an Academy Award winning movie?
You'd get Skyfall, Jeff, but also this sounds good too.
All right, fair enough. I mean, I guess you've answered that question has been answered a bunch of times over the years in cinema.
But I generally like when that happens, right? So much talent with like something that maybe we don't spend as much time and talent with. Yeah. Nobody
in this movie believes they're in a genre movie. They're all taking it completely seriously, like they're making The Godfather. It's really excellent, and the cast is unbelievable, like wall to wall, amazing performances. So I'm very excited to talk in more depth about it later. But if this isn't on your radar, put it on your radar. It really wasn't on my radar. I'm a fan of Steve McQueen, but I just peripherally kind of thought it's kind of sounded like a after school special type of a movie. It's not.
You missed those trailers, Jeff, but I have to say, like, among the best trailers this year. Like something that definitely just like sells like why you would want to see this movie. For me, it was like the Mission Impossible Fallout trailers, and then this one.
Well, now I can watch them.
That is also a trailer that I am skipping because this is one of my most anticipated films of the year.
Yep.
So I'm really psyched to check it out. But that's Widows, and it's going to be in theaters in just a few weeks. I think the release date is November 16th. So keep an eye out for Widows.
Yeah. Now it's time for our sponsor, Frank Bullett's turtlenecks, Gordon Gekko's pinstripes, Lloyd Dobler's trench coat. Film's most iconic characters all had a sense of style as memorable as their trademark lines. Make your mark with Trunk Club personal styling. You get paired with a professional stylist who can help you put together cool, comfortable outfits for everything from Monday morning meetings to Saturday movie nights. It's as easy as messaging your stylist in the mobile app and telling them what you need. They'll put together a trunk of clothes, shoes, and accessories and send it straight to your door. Since Trunk Club is not a subscription, you can order a trunk whenever you want. This also means that there are no recurring charges and no cancellation fees. Start building a screen-worthy wardrobe by visiting trunkclub.com/filmcast. That's trunkclub.com/filmcast.
Alrighty, before we get to our review of Private Life, we want to thank all the people who donated to the podcast this week. A big thanks to Elizabeth Bentley, Jeremy Jensen, and we also received a donation on behalf of Butch McButchface. Butch McButchface. I'm just going to go on a limb and assume that's not their real name, but who knows?
Well, or a very unfortunate name.
I mean, Devindra, you've just been through this experience of naming a child is a very difficult thing, and Mr. and Mrs. McButchface probably spent a lot of time thinking about what they were going to name baby McButchface. And I think coming to Butch McButchface is a bold move. Maybe obvious. Maybe they thought of it and then kind of veered away from it because they thought, it's too obvious. And then they
probably a family name too. This could be Butch McButchface the third.
Yes,
it's so hard to say. It is hard to say for some reason. Butch McButchface.
Your father was Butch McButchface. You're Butch McButchface, and your grandfather is Butch McButchface, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks to all of our donors. Thanks to also subscribers at the rate of $2 per month. Big thanks to Del Nakamura and Cry Queeters. I think that might be Chris with the S left off by accident, but I'm not sure. Chris Queeters? Anyway.
That's a cool name.
You all know who you are. You all know who you are. But thank you so much for all of your contributions. We really appreciate it. And if you want to support what we do here on the podcast, you can always go to paypal.me/filmcast. That's paypal.me/filmcast. And you can also go to slashfilm.com, click on the Slashfilmcast tab, use the PayPal links on the side of the page. We did get a bunch of emails this week from people that were sharing like how much the podcast has meant to them. Some of whom donated, some of who didn't. We would never ask you to donate if it in any way causes hardship for your life. Whether you're listening, leaving a review for us, putting a star rating for us, if you enjoy what we do, anything you do to help spread the word is greatly appreciated. And of course, thanks to all of our donors this week. You guys are awesome. Let's move on to our review of Private Life. That was from the trailer for Private Life, the new film by writer-director Tamara Jenkins. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. An author is undergoing multiple fertility therapies to get pregnant, putting her relationship with her husband on edge. Now, I'm going to put this out there that Tamara Jenkins is a director who makes one movie roughly every 10 years. Mm-hmm. She wrote and directed Slums of Beverly Hills. She wrote and directed The Savages.
Savages, yeah, which is amazing.
Which is, I actually think The Savages is in my top 10 films of all time.
It's an amazing movie.
I think, like, not necessarily because like the filmmaking is spectacular, but because I feel like Tamara Jenkins is one of the people that can capture family dynamics in such an accurate and poignant way. She can create characters who feel completely authentic and like real life people that you've actually met, that you kind of can see aspects of yourself and of your friends and of your acquaintances in these people on screen. And of course, that particular story, The Savages, has a lot of it just has a lot of resonance for me personally. So I'm a huge fan of Tamara Jenkins. I think people need to be giving her more money to make movies whenever she wants to make them. And of course, I was very excited to see that she had wrote and directed a new film called Private Life that's available right now on Netflix that anyone can watch. And so my question for you, let's start with you, Jeff Kanata, is what did you think of this film?
Wow, this film is incredible. I mean, it's so raw and honest, and it feels like a glimpse inside the lives of very, very real people. The performances are exquisite, and I don't know anything about Tamara Jenkins. It certainly feels like a film that comes from personal experience. I have no idea if that's true, but Catherine Hahn, who delivers an incredible performance here, certainly looks a lot like Tamara Jenkins. So I don't know if there's some autobiographical nature to this.
There definitely is. She has talked about, how this movie was made during like she got the idea for this movie during a very challenging time in her life. She gave an interview for Vulture where she was talking about trying to get her second film made and also getting pregnant, and neither was going well. She says, quote, "I just remember ping-ponging between disappointments," she says. I was funny about it, too, when she was talking about it with her friends. I remember my friend laughing really hard and saying, "You should totally write this stuff down. It's good material." And so that's what she did.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like that, right? It feels like somebody's diary almost. It feels that revealing and laid bare, and little moments that are so, the kinds of things that you remember that aren't big, impactful moments in the process of one's life, in the process of this kind of thing, but that you remember, that make an indelible mark. It feels like a movie that's composed of memories and imagery and experience that is beneath the surface, that's like deep into the bones of a person, and heartache. I have two children. I'm of the age, very young children. I'm of the age that many of our friends are either having kids or trying to conceive, and you have all of these range of experiences that you hear about. Our first child, we didn't conceive it the first time we tried either. It is a nerve-wracking experience. It is a emotional experience, and this movie captures all of that in a really beautiful, poignant way. There are wonderful family dynamics that are touched on, but the movie isn't like, it doesn't ever arrive at the places that a film would arrive. It doesn't set things up and pay them off in clean ways. It feels more like life in that it's almost episodic. It's almost it's just sort of the brutality and difficulties of day-to-day life, and these we find out very late in the movie that these are artists, so it kind of resonated in that way with me. I was moved by this movie, and it's hard to watch in a lot of ways. I actually liken it to, how when you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm or The Office, there's that feeling of like watching Larry David or David Brent, and you're just like you cringe
factor,
because of what they do. Well, this movie is that, except instead of Larry David and David Brent, it's life. It's the brutality of life, and you can't escape it, and that's so much worse. Like, it's not these buffoons or these stubborn characters getting themselves into these situations and making you cringe. It's these things that we all know and we've all been through that is just how life goes, that it's like, oh yeah, it hurts to watch. It's so hard. Life is hard. And that makes this movie all the better, but all the more difficult to watch, I think.
one reaction I had to what you said, Jeff, is you're talking about like the moments in between the moments. I continually go back to this quote by Richard Linklater. I don't have the exact quote, but the sentiment of when you think back on your life, and he's talking about the movie Boyhood, you don't remember the graduation, like, you know, high school graduation. You remember the car ride back home from graduation. And when you watch Boyhood, they don't show the graduation; they show the car ride back home. You know,
right?
And I think there's something to that of it's the moments in between, you know, that make up the tapestry of your life. It's you don't choose your memories choose you, kind of thing. And I think this movie depicts that really well. Devindra Hardawar, how about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, this movie cuts deep. I'm with you, Jeff, on everything you're saying. And, you know, I just have to say, like, I'm coming into this movie watching it while cradling my newborn. And it definitely gives me a perspective on it. I have to say, like my wife and I, we didn't go down this path. And this is a path that a lot of people I know have had to deal with, of like IVF and a lot of treatments to get pregnant because you decide to do it at a later age. That's honestly something I was researching because, you know, the clock is ticking for like my family in general. So it's like these were things on my mind, and my wife and I, we had tried for years to get pregnant, and we just didn't get to that point, and things just kind of happened naturally, thankfully. But yeah, this movie is like all of the fears I had of like if I had to like go through this process later. And I definitely felt for a lot of my friends who are much older and who for like just the one thing they want is the one thing that's so impossible to get at that point in their life. This movie just made me feel very much for them. At the same time, too, it is so much. I feel like this movie is also about like just the cost of like pursuing your career, especially if it's like an artistic career, right? Like this movie is so definitively New York, and it's like a specific type of like New York artist too, of like, you know, people who are, you know, in a rent stabilized apartment that they've probably been in for like a decade or two. And they've been there because the rent is cheap, but also because they're successful, but not successful enough to like move on from that easily. And that's, you know, that's something that I think a lot of artists and something I've been thinking of too. It cuts deep in a lot of ways as we get older and as we deal with our professional lives. If you put off having a child, you don't know how difficult that's going to make it the whole process, you know, going down the line. It definitely like picked on all of my fears and anxieties around this whole process. There are a lot of scenes of medical offices and treatments and things going on that, you know, this couple has to deal with as well. And that just felt really true to life. Not through the IVF treatment, but through the just getting pregnant experience. Like there's a lot of that. There's a lot of doctor visits. There's a lot of like weird clinical, you know, things happening. And
what this movie gets so right about that, David, such a great point that you bring that up. What this movie gets so right about that, I think, is there's this clash between the patient who is in this completely unique life moment that feels like this culmination of everything in their world. You know, like this is the most important thing that you can do as a human being is like create life, and you are, everything feels heightened and important. And that comes crashing into people who are literally doing this every single day. And it's a
telling
machine.
The same jokes.
It's a machine. It's a treadmill for them. There's nothing special about it or unique. And that, regardless of anybody's experience, you know, in conception or birthing or everybody runs into that. And it is such a jarring, weird feeling. And this movie captures it in a way that I don't see any other movie having done.
Yeah. So, I mean, I agree with you guys. I really love this movie as well. I want to talk about a few spoilers in the spoiler section, but I'll just bring up two kind of big takeaways I have from this movie. One of them is summed up really well by the opening shot, which is you kind of see Catherine Hahn's pelvis, like in her underwear, right? And she's lying in bed, and the shot is, you know, feels like almost suggestive, right? It's almost like sexy, And then what you discover is that, it's because Paul Giamatti's character needs to inject her in the ass, like inject her full of hormones.
Couldn't be less sexy.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I think the movie brings out really well, which is how completely annihilating this process is to a relationship and to romance. It just completely lays waste to that connection that one can have with their significant other, which is kind of this weird irony, this weird incongruity, like what you're talking about, Jeff, with the doctor's office, this weird incongruity that, like, this thing that's supposed to be like this very joyful thing, it then becomes like an extremely clinical process, right? A clinical, medical, and often physically painful process that, like, where one person is inflicting the pain on the other person.
And especially from the woman's perspective, right? And this movie gets it so accurately, that treating the woman like this object, this machine, this baby making thing that you have to inject with the right things, and it becomes, like you said, it becomes a math problem instead of any human emotional thing, and that is hard, man. It's hard.
Yeah, I agree. And the only other thing I want to mention, like, and I have more things to say in spoilers, but the one thing that I would wish for anyone to take away from this movie, right, is, there's this quote online, it's been attributed to a few people, but it's like, everyone is fighting a battle you don't know, and if someone doesn't have a child, maybe they've been trying for like 6 years to have a child. And your random remark of like, why aren't you guys, when am I going to see a little one, come in? Like, that remark might actually be like one of the worst things you could possibly say to them. Alternatively, maybe I think it's extremely likely that many of us out there listening right now know people who have children who are conceived via these kind of processes, and you don't know you just don't know because it's not talked about. And that's one of the great things about this movie is it helps to bring some of these things out into the open from the darkness, because it's uncomfortable to talk about, right? There's still some level of stigma attached to these things, even though so many people conceive and give birth to children through these methods. It's just not discussed. And so I hope when people watch this movie, like, the reaction is compassion. It is that, hey, like, you have no idea if your friend's kids were conceived via these methods or not. And or you have no idea if they tried to conceive using these methods and failed. And just keep that in mind when you talk about kids, because I think, like, there's this shot of early on in the film of, like, these kids doing a little, like, song and dance at a dinner, right? And what this movie shows is, like, when you are trying to conceive, when you're in the position that these people are in, like, everything around you becomes about that, right? Every like, a seemingly insignificant, song and dance at a dinner is like a reminder of the fact that this couple can't conceive, right? Like, and it's just like the entire universe that these people inhabit is refocused to this one goal, and for good or ill, and often for ill. So I think it's just a really kind of searing portrait of what it's like when one's life becomes dominated by this process. I think the only thing I missed from this movie is I wish I had gotten to see what this couple was like before they were in this process.
Right. Yeah.
Because you see kind of how the process of, like, reproductive health has kind of laid waste to their relationship, but you don't see, like, what it laid waste to. You don't see, like, what came before that they lost through this process. And so that would have been nice, I think, to kind of convey that contrast. But other than that, I thought the movie's great. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I just speak to what you had said before, because I thought that was beautifully said, and it along the same lines, something that I have thought of throughout the process of having my kids, and this movie I think underscores, is it occurred to me, seeing all the people around me in my life, seeing how the process of my kids and all the things that you get terrified about as a parent, and all the crazy ups and downs of worry that are inevitable when you have kids, is that everyone, any child, any one of us, I should say, has won the lottery 1,000 times over. You know what I mean? Like you win the lottery over and over and over again, just like being born and having all your fingers and toes. And, you know, my son is 2 and he's in a school right now. And we just found out one of his little 2-year-old classmates has stage 4 cancer. And it's like crushing and heartrending. And like, there are so many things that can go wrong with the human biology just on a purely chance level, you know, that like we all that make it into adulthood have won the lottery so many times over. To squander that by being an asshole, you know, like how can you even do that? It's the most ungrateful thing you could do, to like take a decent life and fuck it up. You know, it's like, you know how crazy lucky you got just to be okay, you know? And I feel like this movie is kind of underscoring that. Like, it is so, just life is so hard for everybody. And we all have to try. We all have to like be good to each other. I don't know. Maybe it's a little Pollyanna of me, but still.
Well, I think you're saying like we all have like different permutations of being lucky at certain things, right? Like we all have different permutations, and I think it's worth it to recognize that. You know, it's worth it to understand that in many ways we are lucky, and we should respect that and be sensitive to those who are not as lucky. That's kind of my takeaway from this. And also like, you know, you were saying like, oh, how could you grow up and have a lucky life and still be an asshole? And I think like to some extent, the people in the movie, the protagonists of the movie, are kind of assholes. Because,
most definitely.
Because of this process, right? And there's some the movie shows you kind of the cost of this process to the relationship, but also like it shows you that like this singular focus on this one thing, that there is a downside to it, you know, that and that it's worth considering the cost of going down this path. So, which it sounds like is something that Devindra, you were mentioning you had done. So, and yeah, I mean, basically it warps people in ways that I don't think they anticipate. And I think you kind of see that in the movie with like technology has allowed for so much crazy shit to happen now, where you can there's egg donors, and you know, you can like implant one sperm in an egg donor and like have that embryo grow in a third person's body, and that's just like that's only been in the last few decades that's been possible, as far as I understand. And I don't know that our social norms have caught up with it. Like we have no social norms to deal with that right now. And I think that's something this movie highlights really, really beautifully. So
yeah, it's so much about changing social norms too. Like just the idea of like, I won't say too much spoiler stuff, but the idea of how they want to do IVF later is kind of horrifying to their family. And I think for maybe appropriate reasons, even if at the same time maybe not as big a deal as some other people think. Like there's so much changing. The idea of conceiving is just completely different, and who knows, like in a decade or two, what it's going to even change into. It's all kind of crazy now.
Agreed. Well, anyway, I think we have much more to say, but before we do that, why don't we thank our sponsor?
And that is HelloFresh. You've heard us talk about HelloFresh before. I am so pleased that talk about having a family. I actually can cook for my family now. I know it's not something I would ever have thought I could do before HelloFresh, before making it at home, because I got a recipe from HelloFresh. I got ingredients that were delicious, and I had the ability to not have to go to the grocery store and make all that happen on my own. There's different meal plans that HelloFresh offers, classic, veggie, and family. And every box that you get has responsibly obtained ingredients from carefully selected farms and trusted sources. These are things that you'll feel good giving to your family and yourself. You'll probably feel better having made food with your own hands. You know exactly what goes into it. And it doesn't have to be an all-night ordeal. Every week there's a 20-minute meal on the classic menu where you can just, do it very, very quickly and easily. These are doable. These are for somebody like me that didn't think they could cook. This is the kind of thing that's easy, and it makes you feel good, and you actually learn a skill along the way. Delicious recipes that taste good. You actually get a home-cooked meal. And I'm so grateful for these kinds of nights when I have the ability to cook for my family and feel like I made a warm meal with my own hands. And we're going to help you out. If you want to try this, I think you should. You're going to love these recipes. I think you're going to love the fact that you're eating, not going out every night. And for a total of $60 off, that's $20 off your first 3 boxes, visit HelloFresh.com/filmcast60. and enter promo code FilmCast60. It's like receiving 6 meals free. You can think of it. You can remember the 60 at the end because you get a total of $60 off. That's HelloFresh.com/FilmCast60 and promo code FilmCast60 for $20 off your first 3 boxes.
All right, let's get to spoilers for Private Life starting right now.
So glad we had such a deep discussion because I'm ready to read my limerick.
Perfect.
Okay, great. Yeah, great first test case for your limerick plan, Jeff. So here we go. Spoilers starting now. I think probably the main centerpiece of this movie, if I may be so bold, is the Thanksgiving conversation.
Oh yeah,
so
good.
Exquisitely set up and paid off. Like it's like when you see a car about to crash into something, or you see someone about to walk into a pole or something, like know it's gonna happen, but there's nothing you can do to stop it. You know what I mean? It's just like you're watching this horror show unfold in slow motion.
My favorite thing is the guy who goes next.
Oh my gosh, amazing!
And he's oblivious to it.
So amazing.
Well, so good.
He had his own news he wanted to celebrate, Jeff. You know?
Yeah.
31 days sober. It was incredibly, like, the build up to it and it was just so good.
Yeah. And Molly Shannon has now become she plays like Molly Shannon parts, she plays like the sort of overinvested annoying mom. But she does it so well. I mean,
she did the same thing in like Divorce as well, right?
Yes,
similar
exactly.
role in Divorce.
I feel like same for Catherine Hahn too. Like this feels like the character from I Love Dick, just a couple years later, being like, okay, I want a kid now, and this is very difficult.
The whole scene, the whole like opening 10 minutes, I thought was just really well put together. Like something that you said, Jeff, talking about like the clinical nature of it and how like this momentous occasion clashes with the everyday, like not just a job, it's like a business that these people are in. And
Dennis O'Hare, who plays the doctor, is so perfect. Like I love every scene he's in. Like he's so jaunty and but like serious also. I mean, he's not a cartoon character. You kind of buy him as a real doctor. I just loved him.
The scene where Paul Giamatti is in the room where he's supposed to give his specimen, and then like the porn turns on really loud, and then he like gets up and the thing is stuck to his ass. I think what's great about that, and like many scenes like it, is it just shows how this process completely removes one's dignity. It's just like all your dignity is gone in the process of like trying to reproduce using these scientific methods. It's just something that like there's a lot that one sacrifices when one has to go through this. But one of the most heartbreaking scenes to me, honestly, didn't have anything to do with any of the reproductive stuff. It was that scene when the niece reads the theater review in the apartment, and it's like oh, this like Paul Giamatti was part of this show where he directed it apparently, and it was incredible. And it was from the Village Voice, and they make a joke about that, like
oh god,
it was from when the Village Voice was relevant.
What a Village Voice dig, especially today.
Yeah, I think the movie was probably made before the Village Voice folded.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was a sad reference, but then also just like with that theater review being read to him, you can sketch the entire arc of that character's life in your mind. You know, like you've seen the apartment, you've seen like what they've been going through with the reproduction, and then you've heard this theater review, and you're like, oh, like somehow like you connect the dots, like he went from that to he's working at a pickle factory, it seems, right?
Well, they still own the theater company, right? And that's that they like do. There's a co-op run out of it because she's ostensibly working for the theater company, but also doing menial labor. So you get a sense that there's some sort of weird actors co-op happening.
I like Dave's jump to pickle factory here, though. That is.
Aren't they working at a pickle thingy? Right, like
I think that's the theater company. I think the theater company.
Like the co-op. Yeah.
There's an actors co-op.
Oh, okay. Because here's the reason I thought that was because they're loading into a van that has a pickle thing on the side, and he's talking about going to the farmer's market. So I just assumed I might have gotten that.
But I think
correct.
I'm reading a lot into it, but I think that what's happening is that the actors at the theater company are doing these kinds of things to put money into the pockets of all the actors. It's a true actors co-op where they all sort of work and make theater and share profits. But I could be. That's what I just read into it. So the movie isn't explicit.
Yeah, I see what you're saying though, Dave. Like it's the idea of like framing maybe like their careers were in Arrested Development or something like that. Like that dinner conversation with the niece is the thing that really got me. It's like, oh yeah, I have a very successful aunt and she's a renowned playwright, and my uncle does this, and they're still living in a rent controlled, rent stabilized flat in East Village. They haven't done much better, but that whole conversation was both uplifting yet such a gut punch.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows that it's a sacrifice. It takes sacrifices to be an artist and to focus on your career. It's a sacrifice to be an artist because of the financial situation you end up in, and it's a sacrifice to have a career because you end up like not having kids until later in life, and that creates its own challenges. Let's talk about the ending of the film, which I thought was just absolutely brutal. Like
it's
the Michael Clayton style, roll credits while there's actually diegetic action still happening. I
had a physical reaction to it.
Tell me about your physical reaction, Jeff.
I mean, it felt like you talk about a gut punch. I was just like, I think I said out loud, "Oof!" It's like, oh, here we are, and they just sit there and hold on them, and the credits roll over their faces, and it's just not going to change. It's just this unending struggle of life.
Yeah, you understand. Like, there's that amazing scene before where Paul Giamatti says, intellectually, I know I'm supposed to do something like comfort you, but I just don't have it in me, right? That they are both so completely drained by this process that he's just like, I don't even have enough energy to like comfort you because I myself have completely been devastated by this, but he says he's glad because at least it's over. At least it's over. And then you realize like, oh, it's not over yet. And I think like that last scene, just the feeling I'm left with is like how singular this drive is to have children, right? Like that there are few other drives like it in the world. And that they are willing to continue to sacrifice massive quantities of time, resources, money to this cause. That's kind of my takeaway from the ending is like this drive is so powerful that it has ruined their relationship and in some way their lives, and they're still going back for more.
Yeah, but the key to that last scene is that they're on the same side of the booth. And I think that's the ultimate like turn for this movie, because I think throughout most of the movie, he's just like suffering through it. He's dealing with this because his wife wants this. And in that bedroom conversation, he's like, oh yeah, he's the one that can feel relief, because he's the one that wants it to be over in a way. It never felt like he was giving himself to the process, whereas the hopeful look at the ending is that they're on the same side of the booth. and they're holding hands and they're approaching it together as a team rather than like two people just trying to make this thing happen.
Yeah, I think that's a great observation, Devindra. Do you guys have any opinion about whether the person actually shows up? What do you think?
It certainly feels like they're not going to show up. It certainly feels like it's another trip down heartache lane. And this movie sets itself up. The thing that is so heart-wrenching is how constantly, once we've landed on our sort of main plot device of asking the niece to donate one of her eggs and going through all of the familial difficulties that evokes, and constantly she and they are talking about it like this is the solution, that this is what you guys are going to be such great parents. I'm so happy to like give this gift to you. All of the things, it feels like they finally found the way to do it. And that the scene where it's sort of even off screen that you hear that didn't work. It's just no, movies don't do that. The movies. I actually remarked to my wife as we were, 15 minutes in, because I didn't know anything about this movie going in. 15 minutes in, I turned to her and I said, does this movie end with them having the baby, or do they have the baby midway through and we see how that changes their life?
This is what you wanted.
That's amazing,
right?
Jeff. That is amazing.
Right? And the fact that the movie just doesn't ever let them have any happiness or resolution is so hard.
I actually kind of agree with Devindra a little. I'm going to scale back my thoughts a little bit and say, like, I agree with Devindra that there is some kind of happiness to that resolution, because what is implied by that ending is, they're on the same side of the booth, they're in it together, and think of all the conversations that had to happen between, the time cut, right? All the conversations that had to happen between Paul Giamatti saying, like, we're done, it's finished, and then to go and travel back and be at that booth again.
But the movie does that over and over, and I love it. Like, there's the huge fight that they have when he suggests, let's put somebody else's egg in you, and then and there's a huge fight, and you totally understand where she's coming from, and then smash cut to them sitting in bed, and she's scrolling through who are they going to pick.
Yeah,
it's like the movie constantly does that of like, there's no way we're doing this, and then they're doing. It's such a level of desperation, and it's hard.
There is room, by the way, for a follow-up movie in 5 years of them maybe having the kid, or in a couple of years, and then that whole process of these characters getting what they wanted and the hell around that. Although I think Tully is still the definitive movie so far of that experience.
I read this article the other day that was like really depressing. It's at this new site called I can't even pronounce it. Daily, HMMdaily.com. Have you guys heard of the site?
Yeah.
No. Daily. I tried to say into the mic and I was like failed for some reason. You okay, Jeff?
It's delightful.
Anyway, the headline of this article is "Your real biological clock is you're going to die," which I thought it was the article is basically about how people are having kids older in life, and that like if you're having kids when you're Paul Giamatti's age, when that kid is graduating from college, Paul Giamatti is going to be almost 70. And how like when you think about it in terms of time. It gets kind of mind-boggling.
We're all going to be downloading our consciousness into computers by that point, right?
Let's hope so.
That's my
understanding.
understanding.
Have to survive until then.
I just want to say one last thing to comment on what you said, Jeff, about like you didn't expect this movie to go there, and something that Tamara Jenkins said in her interview, which is like one of the reasons she has a lot of difficulty getting her movies made, is because they defy easy genre categorizations.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like this is not really a drama. It's not really a dramedy. It's not a romantic. Like what?
Yeah.
What is this movie? It's like it doesn't.
She's not making a movie every 10 years by choice.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, actually, that's the thing. Is like part of it is by choice because like she puts a lot of herself into it, and it takes a lot of time to like make these like write these scripts to the point where they are so authentic. But I agree with you that like she probably could be making more money if she was making, rom-coms, right?
Instead. Well, and there are all these wonderful loose threads that in a rom-com or in a more typical Hollywood movie you can see the setup payoff, right? There's even the moment where I was certain that the niece had gotten pregnant from doing it with her little boyfriend.
Yeah,
guy
that was
from,
so crazy.
The Worst. Yeah, and movie doesn't even go there, right? It just kind of like raises all these things and goes, no, life is way messier than that. There's no clean, even a sort of uncomfortable, ironic cleanness. We're not going for. It's just none of those things. It's not. She didn't get pregnant because she's already pregnant with his kid, and it's none of it is easy an answer. It's just how life works, where it's just like, no, didn't work, still doesn't work. It's just messy, and oh man, it just makes it so much harder that it's like that because there are no answers to anything.
The other head fake that happened was when she was in the at the clinic. The niece is at the clinic, and she comes out and she says, "Hey, like the doctor said all these terrible things to me." And I thought it was going to be like some kind of fabrication or something like that she had made it up.
I thought that too.
I don't think that was the case. Yeah. So
doctors can be surprisingly shitty, guys. Yeah,
indeed.
And we don't ever see any resolution to that, or like, it's a lot of stuff where it's just messy life stuff.
Yeah. So her movies kind of defy easy categorization, but I think they're great, and I think more people should watch them. And I think we all think that this movie is a great film, right?
Yeah, and I guess I can say that I summed up my thoughts in this limerick.
Okay.
So you say defy easy classification, but I made a limerick out of it. So I think it's,
just get it over with, Jeff.
5 lines. Okay, ready? The hardship of trying to conceive, portrayed honestly, raw, and believably, though you really should know this movie's brutal and grants no reprieve.
I don't know about that believably thing.
It's artistic license is what
kind of a rough limerick there, but otherwise pretty good, Jeff. Pretty good.
Thanks.
Other than the fact that you completely broke the form. Okay, let's move on to our next review of The Old Man and the Gun. Okay. Making pretty good time. That was from the trailer for The Old Man and the Gun, the newest film by director David Lowery. I'm going to read the plot summary from IMDb. Based on the true story of Forrest Tucker, this movie covers an unprecedented string of heists that confounded authorities and enchanted the public. And this movie stars Robert Redford in what he claims is his last on-screen role. Devindra and Jeff, you've both seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, I assume. But this movie, I would actually say, like, you should not watch this movie unless you have seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, because it is kind of like a really what I would describe like as an effective bookend to his career, along with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
I'm not sure you should watch any movie if you haven't seen Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That's how I feel.
So as I've mentioned, Jeff Kanata, Robert Redford has said like this is going to be his last movie. He's retiring after this. Do you think that with this movie he's going out with a bang or a whimper? What do you think?
Well, Dave, I guess you could sum up my thoughts best in the form of a limerick.
Oh, okay.
This elderly gentleman's armed, and I'm here to sound the alarm. Go watch him rob banks. It's enjoyable thanks to Redford's transcendent charm.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. Not bad, right. Jeff. Not bad.
Thank you.
Bravo.
And I don't know if I need to add to that because this pretty much sums up everything I feel about this movie. But I will say, I mean, he is a treasure. I've been a Redford fan ever since I was a little kid. My dad, I very clearly remember the day I was young, I don't know, 10, 11, and he told me to watch back-to-back Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and The Sting. Ooh. And those two movies have left an indelible mark on me. I fell in love with Redford and Newman, and I mean, I've watched those many, many times since, and they're classics, and they're of my favorite films of all time. And he's amazing. I mean, he is a movie star. He leaps off the screen even at his age. It is undeniable that he is he's a movie star. He's got charisma that he doesn't have to do anything, and you just want to watch him. You want to be friends with him. You want to hang out with him. And he has found in this role, in this film, a character who is all charisma, right? That's kind of just who he is. He's a guy that does unlawful acts, but everybody tends to like him and want to be with him. And I, you know, movie feels a little bit like a fairy tale. It feels a little unbelievable, even though it is based on a real person. It feels, like a movie, but I just had a blast watching it. Sissy Spacek is wonderful in it as well. It's great to see sort of a romance among an age group that you don't tend to see in films very often. And I mean, I just wanted this movie not to end. I loved being with this guy. I wanted to see what he would think of next. And it's an easy, breezy film. It is, I think, a textbook good sit. It's just like, what better way to spend 90 minutes in a movie theater than to hang out with Robert Redford and watch him steal some stuff? It's great.
It's a great sit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say it is a good sit. Devindra, what do you think?
Yeah, I love this movie as well. I do love Robert Redford roles where he is this sort of like charming con man in a way, or trying to steal things. So I also you could draw a direct line from Sneakers too to this movie.
Yeah.
This movie, it's just so much fun. It is I think I haven't had this much fun with a crime movie like this since The Brothers Bloom. And this kind of has the same sort of vibe, except it's maybe a little less cartoonish. But I think it's just as breezy and fun and charming. And, there is danger, but at the same time, he just smiles at it. The most somebody gets hurt is there's a slight gunshot. And even then, it's not treated that seriously. It's a movie that,
happens off screen too.
Yeah. And they can just have so much fun with this material. I love David Lowery's style too. We've talked about Ghost Story, we've talked about Pete's Dragon. He's just it's a very classical style in a way. Also, really enjoy the score to this movie. I don't know if I've heard much of Daniel Hart's stuff before, but I can't get this movie's sound out of my head either. Just a great, enjoyable, all around great sit, I'd say.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I thought there were a few things about it worth pointing out. Jeff, like you said, this movie kind of covers this relationship that you don't typically see depicted on screen, right? This older couple, and you kind of make you kind of make different decisions when you're at that age. From what I have observed, I can't speak for everyone. I don't want to make too broad generalizations, but from what I've seen. I know of couples who, they were married, the two people were married for many years to other people, and then those people passed away, and they just found an arrangement that worked. They live together, but they're not boyfriend girlfriend, but they're not they're not husband and wife, and they just kind of live together. I'm not saying that's what the relationship was here. I think it was more romantic than that, but I think that at some point it feels like you just stop giving a crap what people think, and you just kind of do what works for you. Is what it feels like the stage that these people have entered into. Please tell me if I'm wrong in my assessment.
I'm really looking forward to getting old and being in that phase too.
Yeah,
just not giving a shit anymore.
Yeah, not giving a shit. That's gonna be awesome.
It's gonna be great.
That's kind of. I mean, to some extent, that's kind of how this character has lived through his life. I think it's interesting that
I think there's an argument to be made that it's the exact opposite. But.
Interesting.
It's that he gives more of a shit than anybody else, but it's sort of just misplaced. But we can talk about that in spoilers.
Yeah, let's do that. Some people have said this is a metaphor for filmmaking, and here's an example of someone who said that. Mike Ryan at uprocks.com wrote, "At any point in the film, you can substitute robbing banks for making movies, and it all still makes perfect sense. Here's Redford, who's now 82 years old, in a role where he looks like a gosh darn kid. He's smiling and hamming and charming his way through this whole film. Looks like he's having the time of his life. There are times when you'd swear Redford is in the prime of his life. Why would anyone want to give this up? It's obvious Redford is asking himself the same question, but that's the thing. How many roles are there for people Redford's age where the character just gets to be happy as we watch him do what he loves doing? Too many actors end their career on something solemn, but no, that was never how Redford was going to end it. We want to see Redford grinning from ear to ear in The Sting, and here he is, one last time, conjuring up that boyish charm, one last time, end quote. That's from Mike Ryan's review of the film at uprocks.com, and I thought it was really a good way to put the metaphor of this movie, of like that in a way this represents kind of Robert Redford's career. This character, right, represents Robert Redford's career. Super charming. He is a total gentleman, and in a way, swindling the audience by getting them to pay money for him. You know, like I don't mean that in a malicious way, but it's also kind of interesting, the movie's tone, right? It downplays the human cost of this guy's actions. I'm sure like there were plenty of people traumatized by his actions. But the movie kind of wants to just portray Robert Redford as like a happy-go-lucky guy. What did you guys think of kind of the negative aspects of this movie? Because it's clear that it does have a cost. Like you do see people who are interviewed, let's say, in the movie who like for whom Robert Redford's character has not had a positive influence on their lives. And so I'm wondering, like, do you come away with like, hey, this is like just a fun movie that like. But that like minimizes his crimes and the bad nature of some of his crimes, or like how do you reconcile that, Devindra? What do you think?
Yeah, with a movie like this, right? It's not a documentary. I'm not expecting it to be like a fully accurate rendition. I do think they do try to fit in something. Like there's a scene where Casey Affleck's character travels and talks to somebody, and I think that kind of gives you a glimpse of like, oh, the other side of like, the cost of his actions in his life and things that he's done that he probably doesn't even know about, right. But he's affected people's lives in bad ways.
Jeff, how do you feel like it reckons with that? Do you feel like
it's go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's do you feel like it does a good job of reckoning? Do you feel like
no.
Yeah.
I think it's unconcerned with that.
Right.
We do see this view of him from some people who have to deal with his lack of commitment to real life. And that certainly leaves a mark, I think. I think the movie to its credit, doesn't pull punches there. But for the most part, I think that's why I describe it as a bit of a fairy tale and a bit of a Hollywood jaunt. It's not trying to create a realistic view of this guy. It's just reveling in the charming what's the cliche, the gentleman thief or whatever, that's the roguish, a gentleman rogue or whatever it is. It is I think a false false characterization. I don't think the movie isn't concerned with creating a well-rounded look at what the cost of those actions are. It's much more interested in delivering a flight of fancy, and I think that's fine. I don't have a problem with that in this case.
Yeah, I think as long as you don't go to this film expecting a kind of hard-boiled crime thriller, right. As long as you expect a movie that will show you Robert Redford at some of his most charismatic. And I mean, the movie doesn't shy away from showing how old Robert Redford is. Many shots like focus on like his wrinkles and stuff. Yeah.
There's a really funny part where someone's asked to describe him and they're like, he's between 50 and 60. He could be 50 or 60. And I'm like, I was sitting there like, you know what? I'd buy it. I'd buy it that he was 50. Sure. He was 82, but you know what? It's Redford.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want, go ahead, Devindra.
I was going to say, speaking of tone, by the way, Catch Me If You Can came to mind.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it kind of has that same vibe too. That one got a little more emotional, a little more serious, like over like towards the end. But I think like these sorts of movies of just like, crazy caper movies of wildly charismatic people, I'm fine with the tone like that. Yeah.
All right, shall we get to spoilers, gentlemen? Spoilers for The Old Man and the Gun starting right now. So I think one of the things that really kind of baffled me about this movie was the way that it handled the gun of the title. And
the gun that's never shot.
Yeah, and
anti-Chekhov's gun.
It's anti-Chekhov. Nice. And I've read an interview with David Lowery where he talks about his that David Lowery basically he's almost sworn off making movies with guns these days. And I thought it was really interesting, like how he talked about it, where he made a movie with guns, like Ain't Them Body Saints. I think had some guns in it, right? And some people, some shootouts and stuff. And he basically like. I read this interview in Entertainment Weekly with him. Katie Hasty did this interview with him where he talked about how he didn't like he didn't like the fact that gun was in the title of the movie, but it's the same title as the New Yorker article, right? That this movie is based on, so it kind of made sense to keep it that way. But he was talking about how like it really started to upset him to have like shootouts where like people die, and he started thinking about here. I'm going to read the quote from the article here. Ain't Them Body Saints was a big part. That's part of the culture of Western civilization. But I don't like that part of our culture. When I wrote the very first version of Ain't Them Body Saints, it was more of an action movie and had a lot of gun violence in it. And I just did not feel comfortable writing that. The movie became what it became because I did not like writing violence. I was writing all these action scenes that were disposable and bad guys getting shot left and right. And I would think to myself, well, who were those guys? What brought them to this point where they die now? And how awful that they are getting killed without anyone recognizing who they are. End quote. And I thought that quote was so interesting. Like, we see lots of movies where people are gunned down left and right, by the dozens or hundreds. If you've been watching, like, The Night Comes for Us and Apostle, like I've been watching the last few weeks. And it's like, what brought these people to the moment that this is where they die? What is the arc of their life that they die here? And then there's something kind of upsetting about the fact that we just don't recognize. Like, these people are nameless.
Isn't there a moment in one of the Austin Power movies where he kills a henchman and then you see like quick flashes of that henchman's entire life?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that. And so anyway, this feels like a guy, when I'm reading this interview, it feels like a guy who made a movie called The Old Man and the Gun, and during the course of making that film, realized he didn't want to have anything to do with gun culture. And so what's interesting is you only see the gun 2 times in the entire film. It's like in the opening scene and then later on in the film. And then like every other time, you only are hinted at the gun. And that was his way of not showing the gun. Like, he didn't want to show the gun, even though the gun is what the guy is using to threaten people and get them to give him money. And I almost thought at one point the movie was going in a different way when the bank manager said, hey, did you see the gun? And he's like, oh, I don't know, but he told me he had one. And I'm like, was he just faking the whole time? Like, was the movie going to say he's faking the whole time? But no, you saw the gun in the opening scene.
Sissy Spacek discovers it in the glove compartment.
That's right. That's the second time, I think, right?
Just decides not to make an issue out of it.
It feels like these years together. Yeah.
So I just thought it felt kind of a weird, like, mixed tone where the movie's about a dude threatening bank people with a gun, but then the movie never shows the gun because it doesn't want to be involved with perpetuating like the glorification of gun violence. So that just was weird. It was weird to me. But I actually,
it's the gun as a symbol, it's potential violence. But
they just don't show it on screen. But I guess I would rather that than like full blown glorification of the gun. So, but it struck me as odd that in a movie called The Old Man with a Gun, you only see the gun twice, and not like
brilliant. I tell you,
it really leans into the old man half of the title.
Yeah, the old man is really doing the heavy lifting of that title. Let's talk about the ending. I mean, the ending is kind of a tragedy. We got to talk about how amazing that montage was of the prison breaks.
Oh yeah, where it used like old Redford footage too.
Like that, I was just like, wow, that is impressive filmmaking. Like, he's telling a whole story, a whole like film's worth of story in one shot, and he does it like 8 times in a row or however many shots there are. I thought that was just incredible filmmaking right there.
And it does feel like, that's the much more interesting movie. Those 14 movies right there seem pretty interesting.
Yeah.
My favorite scene in the whole movie is the the scene in the store where he tries to get her to steal the bracelet with him.
Yeah, that was great.
And
great moment.
She's like, "Oh, this is fun and silly," and then realizes, "Oh no, he's seriously going to steal this," and says no.
Yeah,
I just thought that was so lovely the way that all played out, and there's no dialogue. It just all is them interacting with it. I mean, their chemistry is exquisite too. I mean, the scene just at the diner where they first are talking and tells her the truth and she doesn't believe it. And just all of the interplay between them is so, you just watch great actors act forever. It's amazing.
I love the scene, the confrontation between Casey Affleck and Robert Redford in the bathroom hallway.
It's just like, can't believe it's happening.
I can't believe it's first of all, like, dude, you have taken your boldness too far now, Forrest. And then of course it proves to be true. I mean, him getting caught was not directly connected with that. I'm curious, like, why did Casey Affleck just like apprehend him and like cuff him right there? That was weird to me. But anyway, he ended up getting caught anyway. But it just was a great moment. I gasped when Casey Affleck was like, I think I know what I'm doing for us. Like he knows who he is. And I just like, that is a pretty badass moment.
I mean, nothing against Casey Affleck, but it's literally the only scene in the movie where he feels alive.
Where that character feels alive, you're saying. Right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea of this character, this 40-something guy who he feels, I guess, a little dead inside. And meanwhile, somebody twice his age is just like loving life. And that was very... that dichotomy is there on purpose. I don't know if we really understood why that was happening, though, for him, other than he was turning 40.
I mean, clearly it's intentional, and kudos to Affleck. But I don't know. I was struck in this movie, like, there's something I don't think about enough, and that is how small day player actors can have a huge impact on a movie. And this was one of those movies where that occurred to me. I watching Casey Affleck sort of mope his way through this part, and I get it. He's doing something specific. Good on him. He was fine. But there's a scene with this actor named Robert Longstreet, who plays the lawyer Red Redford's lawyer in the movie, and he probably worked a day, maybe two tops, on this entire movie, and he has one scene, and he delivers this. He reveals to Casey Affleck's character all the information about who this guy was and what he's done and how he's broken out 14 times and how if I ever met him, I'd tell my kids about it. I thought I'd maybe write a book about it. Like, there's a magic to him retelling this. And this is a dude that probably walked in to a set, maybe had a couple of days, and was done. And he just really added so much texture and delivered what is basically exposition, but did it. And it felt alive. It felt real. It felt great. And I don't take enough time on the show to sort of highlight people that do that. And I thought it was a great juxtaposition between him and Affleck. I was like, it's fine what he's doing, but it's just nothing special. And here's, a guy with very little to work with who did, I think, something special.
I agree with you. He totally nailed it. He also plays Mr. Dudley in the Haunting of Hill House TV series. I don't know who that character is, but he seems to have been in many episodes. Yeah. I agree with you, Jeff. Like, it's worth recognizing kind of, the day actors like that, who just do the thankless jobs. And also that character, his narration is in the trailer, right? Like, right. They decided that performance was so good, they're going to use that line delivery to frame the trailer. So I thought that was a really effective scene. Let's talk about the last scene in the movie, guys. I thought it was pretty tragic, right? It's like this guy he cannot escape his true nature. There's that moment, Sissy Spacek, she like opens her eyes, she like realizes what's happening. I thought that was very effective too. Any thoughts on the final scene in this film?
I mean, it's a take on Get Busy Living or Get Busy Dying, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
He's and that's why I pushed back on you earlier about if he just doesn't care what people think anymore. I don't think he cares intensely, maybe not what other people think, but what he thinks. And he tries to live a life that's not authentic to him, and it is hollow. And he only feels alive by doing this thing. And I think that's kind of the thesis of the movie is like, it's in its own weird, perverted way, do what you love,
Yeah. Even if yeah. Yeah.
Even if it gets you back in prison. You know?
Even if it like at massive human cost to your life and relationships. But yeah, I mean that's kind of there's another aspect of how the film metaphor, like, or that this movie is about filmmaking, how that can kick in there. You know,
Yeah,
is that he's going to keep going back to those banks. He's going to keep robbing those banks. He's going to keep making those movies as long as he can.
As a great sailor once said, "I am what I am."
and it's not even it's I don't even think it's limited to robbing the banks. I think he loves breaking out of prison too. I think like the fact that he didn't break. There's that smash cut into a title card when she's like, "Stay put," and it goes, "He did." You know, it feels like this massive compromise that he didn't break out of prison.
Right.
You know,
he kept his demons at bay for as long as he could, and then he couldn't anymore. So,
right.
All right. Any other thoughts? Shall we wrap it up? All right. That's our episode. That's our review of The Old Man and the Gun. Hey, it's been a few weeks since we've all been together, guys, on the podcast.
Good.
So good to be back.
Yeah. I've enjoyed this conversation, talking with you guys about these amazing films that we've had a chance to see. And thank you to our listeners for listening to this episode. If you've made it this far, find more episodes of this podcast at slashfilmcast.com. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. Our spoiler bumper comes from filmmaker Kyle Hillinger. Our theme song comes from adamwarrock.com. Stay tuned to hear what we'll be discussing next week. In the meantime, Devindra Hardor, where can you find more of your work on the internet this week?
Oh, you can find me on Twitter at Devindra, and I write it about tech at Engadge.com, but I'll be off there until like mid-November taking care of the baby.
Jeff, how about you?
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Jeff Kanata, which is spelled with 2 N's and 1 T. I do a video game podcast called DLC that you can find at 5by5.tv/DLC. Lots of fun discussion about Red Dead Redemption 2 this week. And also, I just want to thank everybody for being so supportive about Dave's plan to do limericks on the show. You know, he needs that kind of support when he comes up with an idea as bold and as revolutionary as this. But I think we can all agree it is improved the show immensely, and kudos to Dave for coming up with that wholly original idea of his.
Okay. You can sign up to receive newsletters from me at davechen.net/letters, and check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/davechensky. That's Dave Chen, SKY. Next week, Jeff Kanata and I, David Chen, will not be on the podcast, probably. So it's gonna be all Devindra, I think,
yes.
and some awesome guests. So an awesome guest or two. So like that's assuming that Devindra is not too busy taking care of the kids. So we'll see what happens. It's all a little bit up in the air, but the film we'll be reviewing is Suspiria. So check that out. It'll be out in limited release, and I think there'll probably be a lot to discuss. That's all for this week's episode of the Slash Filmcast. We'll see you next week.